record to this computer, you all should get a pop-up, I think.
Yep.
And then we'll just pray that the audio works when I send this eventually.
Well, I'm sure it will.
I
First,
haven't had issues
huh?
yet. I haven't had issues yet recording it. I've only done it twice, but so far so good.
I'll go with your streak. We'll keep the streak going. So I want to thank everybody for coming today and being part of this sort of roundtable discussion about success strategies and how to navigate our program. Do you all want to introduce yourself briefly and maybe say a little bit about who you are so folks know who they're talking to or watching?
I guess I should start. My name's Chris. I use he, him pronouns. Full-time cohort, graduate this May, so class 2024, concentration community mental health. And I guess I'm president of MSWA, so that's part of why I'm here, and have a background in community mental health programs and community partnered research.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Iridian. I'm part of the Flex program. I'm on my second out of my 3 years. My focus is community mental health, and my focus is right now professionally to include policy research and medical case management. And I am the vice president of MSWA.
Hi, I'm Marjan. I am part of the full-time program graduating this spring, so May 2024. And I am a child welfare concentration as well as a CalSWEC recipient. And I am the treasurer of MSWA. And yeah, I'm really big into micro and like practice within the community. So yeah.
I'm Omri. I'm a community mental health concentration, also in my second year. I'm the admin coordinator for MSWA, and I have a non-social work background, so this program is possible for everyone.
My name is Gavin. I'm the events coordinator for MSWA, allegedly, and also in my second year of the full-time program, graduating spring of 2024 with a community mental health concentration. And I did about 6 years between undergrad and grad school, so I'm a big proponent of coming back to school, restarting those wheels turning.
Well, thanks to all of you for being here. So let's just start off our discussion by talking about the elephant in the room, so to speak, imposter syndrome. How do I make it through? Did they pick the right person? Am I really meant for this work? What tips or advice might you have for newer students to navigate that issue?
I can start.
Yes. You want to start, Marjan?
Oh yeah, sure.
Go for it.
Okay. So for me, I came straight from undergrad. So I graduated in the spring and I came straight in the fall. So for me, when they placed me at my internship and my internship was like, yeah, your supervisor is not going to be at your site on either of your days. And I was at a school. I was in a school setting, so I was giving counseling to elementary through middle school kids. And I had a really big battle with imposter syndrome because I was like, I just graduated from undergrad and like I wasn't even social work. I was sociology. Like I've never given counseling. Like, why are they letting me do this with these kids? But just kind of realizing that you are here for a reason, and like if they really didn't want us, we wouldn't have been accepted, like if there was stuff that they were like, maybe not, like we wouldn't have gotten accepted. So they see something in us and they think that we can do it. And like, because we had letters of rec and everything. So like other people think we can do it. So just kind of realizing and seeing that like as the weeks went by, I saw myself being more confident in my abilities, especially since I didn't have a preceptor or instructor there with me at my site, like realizing like, oh, like I am doing this by myself and I'm like seeing improvement and seeing progress and getting feedback. So it's something that I feel like we all face, but eventually you kind of get to see a little bit of like what you're able to do.
Thank you. I love that. Chris, you were going to say something.
Yeah. I guess for me, I had a different experience. I took so many years off and came an experience that I thought I could like jump past imposter syndrome. So when I had it, especially at like internship. I like beat myself up for having it. And I remember I had this moment, and Marjan she heard probably this in our practicum class, where I spent a lot of my early semester being like boohoo imposter syndrome. And at some point I realized that wasn't, I kept asking myself, like, do I belong here? Can I be a therapist? Am I equipped to give advice? And I got to a point where those are not useful questions for me. And for me, the way I think of it is like, I can never convince myself of the other way. Like, I'm not the person that's gonna be like, you know what, I do belong here, because that doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't like work for me. So instead, I just shifted my focus and asked myself different questions. So like, instead of asking myself, do I belong? Am I good enough? It's just like, how do I get better? And kind of coming to practicum with that kind of sentiment of curiosity and openness. Like, I think just took me out of it, where I was no longer even concerned with if I belong here or not. I was just kind of worried about like, how do I get better as a therapist? How do I serve this client? What can I learn about? And I felt like after that kind of epiphany, it just like clicked. And I mean, obviously not every session or every day internship or school was great, but I think not even asking myself the question of, do I belong here, and just focusing on different questions. That's kind of how I coped with it in my first year.
I love that. That's great. You really focused on the learning objectives rather than the self-analysis. You took the curriculum approach and said, how much can I get out of this? How can it grow? And Marjan, you're absolutely right. Speaking as the they who do admissions, we absolutely would not have let you in if you didn't belong here. That would never have happened. Kelly Segovia does not make mistakes. Would not happen. Just putting it out there. Anyone else have anything they want to say on that topic?
Yeah. So for me, imposter syndrome, it started kicking in more in my second year, definitely, than compared to the first year. Just because the first year it was more education based, so I still felt pretty confident. You know what? I'm in the role of a student still. I'm still learning. And so once we actually got placed into practicum, that's when it started kicking in. It's like, okay, people are really trusting me to care for people right now. And so it just kind of blindsided me when it hit me, but it was a matter of just reminding myself that we were chosen for a reason, and that I have the skill set, or else I wouldn't have been placed where I got placed. Because that also was a big something that was just clouding my mind. I kept questioning myself, do I even have the skill set? Have I learned enough? Am I even ready to take on this role? But it's more just trusting the process and trusting the people who allowed us to come into this program and also placed us into our internship sites. And that we're here to learn, and we're going to make a few mistakes, but to not let those mistakes start clouding us and start turning into, I'm not good enough for this role. I'm not good enough to be here. But
Love what.
I'll add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
The experience, certainly, especially of the first year of the program while you're in internship and classes, definitely feels a bit like building the plane while you fly it. And I think the thing that's important not to rush past is that some degree of struggling self-doubt, some wave of, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into, is very common as an experience. It's not a signal of some impending doom or that something has gone wrong. Similarly, if you don't have that first initially or until later, or by some miracle at all, that doesn't mean a bad thing either. There's room for a lot of diverse experiences. And then the other thing I would say is, if you are feeling like in over your head or overwhelmed, A, you're not alone. And B, the cool thing about it is, like, especially if it's in your internship, then in your practice classes, if you're really engaged with the material and the conversations that are happening, you're going to be picking up things. Oftentimes it'll be like 2 weeks after you could have really used it the last time. But often my experience is, when I find myself in a situation where I'm grasping for the tools that I don't yet have a good handle on to figure it out, it can be a really effective motivator, kind of what Chris was saying his strategy was, of saying, okay, I'm going to really dive into this and try to learn this so that I don't end up in this situation again. For me, it can be pretty easy to fall back into like the wrong idea that I sort of have to have it all within me to be a good therapist or a good clinician or something. But in reality, like, so much of what we're doing is learnable. If you feel like not great at it now, it doesn't mean you're not going to be great at it. And even in a little while, you'll be surprised at how fast you can pick things up and get going on things with your support from your field instructor, your faculty, like the different classes, things that are going on. So that's what I would add. Oh, and especially if you're from like any identity group that has to deal with like extra stuff on top of like the regular struggles of life. There are a lot of systems that are at play that are causing you to doubt yourself. So like having imposter syndrome isn't a symptom of not having enough self-confidence or self-esteem. It's often a symptom of what the world and systems and society and messages around you are telling you. So I would just put that out there as well.
Snaps for that. Yes. Omri, anything to add or?
I guess just really briefly, I remind myself that this isn't the first time I felt imposter syndrome. It's not going to be the last time that I feel imposter syndrome. So I might as well just kind of cozy up to it a little bit and get comfortable and like accept that this is part of the growth process and turning into a social worker. And so I don't know, I've like made friends with my imposter syndrome, so to speak.
I love that. I love everything all of you said. And my only addition would be that as faculty, we want you to make mistakes. How else are you going to learn if you're not trying, if you're not experimenting, if you're not putting out new ideas and figuring whether or not they work, right? So whether or not you're being correct is less important than whether or not you're growing and you're learning and you're really trying to gain those skills. So one of the best ways I think to look at imposter syndrome is to realize I'm only an imposter if I've stopped trying to learn, because then I'm impersonating a social work student and not really being one. But if you're trying to learn and you're doing it, that's why you're here. That's what I would take from it. So I appreciate all those thoughts. How about writing? The writing. We have a lot of writing in this program. I see you all nodding your heads. Getting used to APA style, creating a research type of argument versus what you might have done in undergrad, which might have been more sort of regurgitation based. Like, let's talk about that. Thoughts, tips, ideas.
I guess for me, this is a weirder topic because my background is from research. So it's just a different context for me coming in, because I feel like I just got more reps in writing compared to some of the other students. Things that stand out to me though are, I think there's a lot of practice by doing. Like you can't learn to write by thinking about it. You have to like write. And because I've been through like the review process, much of how I got better is like having my work torn apart, having to respond to comments and then make those revisions. And I think there's not a lot of time for this in the program, but professors will give feedback. And oftentimes it's just like, I got this grade. I like this professor now, or I don't like them now, based on how that grade goes. And not really like thinking through how you would address those revisions. Just kind of like, they said my intro was bad, so I'm just bad at intros, but like, that's not how writing works. So I think some thoughtfulness and some reflection on any feedback you get, it doesn't have to be during the semester, but at any point, will show you a lot of how you write. And even if someone has a lot of energy and time, like at some point going back, trying to address those revisions just for the sake of learning, I don't expect anyone will do that because you don't have to, but much of my learning has been through revision. And I think on the APA part, same thing, a lot of it's just practice. Like I learned APA because at work, I work for half of it's a medical school. So my PI is often like, this article got rejected from a biomedical journal. So doing social work, like needs to be APA, like change all the citations to APA. And just the practice of it, like you just pick up on it. Whereas I feel like when you have your Hogan perspectives due, and it's just like, I don't know APA, like I need to learn all right now. Like that's just not how you learn. Like you learn through reps. And granted, there's a manual and that is a set of rules that you'll figure out eventually. But I think part of it is just like trusting the process and like going through it, and like instead of judging feedback or grades that you get, like really taking them in. But I could go on forever about writing like structure and other tips, but I'll say reflection and feedback are the things that come to mind for me.
I second strongly, like I'm the king of wanting cookies. Like when I turn in a paper, I like play out the instructor downloading my submission and then reading it and then like weeping tears of how beautiful a paper I submitted and like just gushing what an incredible job I've done. And then inevitably and invariably, when it falls short of that goal, sometimes I'm like, oh. But it's like I feel very attached. My identity is very attached to my writing. So I've got a lot of practice in this area of being like, oh, okay, this could be better. The thing I think I would emphasize is that instructor feedback is like such a gift. And I feel like it's often taken as an insult or a slight instead of like this instructor, especially if they give you really good feedback that's like really detailed, or this is how you could do better, or like it's such a gift of time and attention for them to do that based on how many students, how many of us there are that has to happen. And really seeing it as like, wow, this professor cared enough to give me this feedback, hopefully written in a way that's very still encouraging and constructive, might be a way to help sort of see the different side of that. And then like also the conversation doesn't have to be over when you receive that feedback. Like take it, digest it, but then go back. I remember my first semester with Hogan's policy paper. Big struggle I have is running out of time. When we get to the time management conversation, I'm gonna stay quiet and let other people talk about that. But I ran out of time for the Hogan paper, and so I didn't meet the page limit. I forget, one particular section about the agency was too short, and he dinged me for some points on that. And I reconnected and I was like, what kind of information were you looking for? Like, should I have filled it out with? Because mostly I was just like exhausted and tired from the situation I got myself in for procrastinating too long. And I was like, this is good enough. But then when he shared sort of like, flesh it out for me a little bit, I was like, oh, I definitely could have done that even with the little bit of energy I had left. I got in my own head about how it had to be perfect. Whereas like he was just looking for a little more context that was very easily identifiable from the website. And I just didn't think it was interesting enough to include. So you can really get in your own head, and talking with your professor about the feedback they give can help bring you back out of it and be like, oh, this is actually more simple than I was thinking. And not, it's not this huge Mount Everest I have to climb.
Really quick, I want to emphasize Gavin's point about like detaching yourself from the content that you make, because I often hear people in the program talk about like, I don't understand, I tried this hard, I spent this much time, I got this grade. Like at the end of the day, like, I mean, you kind of graded on effort, but not really. Like you graded on what you produce. And I like that idea that Gavin brought up, like not identifying with your work and like having that healthy distance. So I'm gonna just emphasize that before we move on.
It's a great idea. I wish I could actually practice it. Some days I do it, some days I don't.
For me, cause like when it comes to writing, a lot of the time we're able to choose, like not like whatever we want to write about, but like within the broad theme, like we can kind of see what we want to write about. So like you can choose a policy, or you can choose like a research topic or things like that. Like you're able to choose what you want to write about. So for me, it's always been of finding something that I'm interested in or have passion towards, because that makes it so much easier. Because like if you're being told write a 12 to 15 page paper on a topic that like you're like meh about, that can seem like daunting and be a little hard. But like if you have the option to like choose whatever you want, you can within a certain set of parameters, like find something that interests you, find a piece of legislation or policy that either you can personally align with, or you have like some sort of you're invested in a little bit or have interest in it. Because the more you can relate and the more you can identify with the topic you're writing about, in my opinion, it just makes it a lot easier to do that writing, because you're like, oh, like I want to say all of this and I want to explain all of this. And I think it makes it go by a little easier.
And so I think for me, I don't have a lot of confidence in my writing. And so there's a few like strategies that over time I found really work for me to get things started. And so the first thing I do is like when I wake up and before I can talk myself out of starting an assignment, like I just sit down and I write and I get it over with and I suck it up and I just do it. Like there's no kind of like, I don't know, fluffy way around it. It's just a matter of like sitting in front of my computer. And then also, if you're able to start things early enough and you just have to write 2 pages per weekend or 1 page a day, that also sort of makes the bigger assignments easier to, I don't know, like accomplish and tackle if you know that it's just these like short little bits that you have to do, and then it all adds up and then the paper's done. So
Omri, can I ask you, so I wonder if you can expand on what it means, right? Because like you said, you wake up and you do it, right? But if the it is an entire paper, sometimes I'm like, I have to write this paper, I have to write this paper, I have to write this paper. I sit down and write the paper, and there's like 8 things I have to do before I can actually start typing things, and I try to do them all at the same time. How do you start yourself?
I think this goes into the time management like
Segue.
portion of the discussion.
Let's go there. Let's go there.
I just wanted to make sure, Iridian, if you had anything to add in about writing, so before that.
I mean, what can I say? I'm not the most perfect person when it comes to writing. I'm usually the one starting the week of, which please do not do. But what I will say about writing is that not to discard the resources that are available to us, Grammarly, the Writing Center, because they're still really, really, really valuable resources to use. Even OWL Purdue, just because when I graduated from undergrad, I was still practicing APA 6, and then I had to switch to APA 7. So that was a bit of a shock. So using the resources really does help. But other than that, that's why I've been quiet, because I'm not the best with papers.
I'll add one thing. I was very like much on focusing on writing as a practice you develop, but in a more practical sense, like I don't understand people who don't do outlines. Like I'm sure it works for other people, but like I have multiple steps before I even get to the actual language. And by the time it's time to put the language together, the paper is like 80% done. I just need to put it together into language. And also like the one thing I notice a lot when I read papers is that the structure or the flow of ideas has not been thought through, and it just comes off as incoherent and messy. But if your ideas have like a logical flow to it, like if every topic sentence is good, like that's half the paper right there. So I'm a big proponent of outlines and thinking through structure and reasoning, and not starting with a blank page, because if I did that, I would get nothing done.
I love all of that. I'm learning so much just from listening to you about ways students approach writing. It's awesome. So let's talk about let's get the T, capital T on time management. How do we best organize ourselves to be successful in this program?
Gavin. So I guess to answer the question of like how I do it when like I was talking about writing and also just managing my time, the first week of the semester, I wish I could show it, it's sitting above my desk, but I have a calendar that's the entire semester laid out on paper that I could see it all at a glance. I put all my assignments in there, and then I start counting backwards. So if I know that we have a 15-page research paper due week 7, I have, X amount of days for these different parts of the paper. And so I block in like each weekend kind of what part I want to accomplish. And I do that for all of the assignments. And so then it kind of ends up for me, as the weekend approaches, I don't need to really think about like, what do I need to do? I just look at my calendar, it's already listed. I need to read 4 articles for a lit review. I need to write 2 pages of like a case analysis. I need to, I don't know, what do I have? What else do I have this weekend? And I have to like read a little bit for policy and do like one part of my code book. And it's already laid out. I don't need to think about it. And then I just have to wake up and eat the frog. I don't know if anyone's heard that before. And just kind of like do it. So, and then I also build in times when, like today, for example, I have a very like light day. So I give myself those also, because that works better for me. I'd rather focus very intensely on something for a day and then follow that up by a day where maybe I'm just like skimming through readings for class or something. So
I do the same thing. I'll like take the syllabus at the beginning, and like for me, I do it in my planner. So like I'll go through my whole planner and like go backwards, and like I always give myself a day or two at the end to like review and submit and everything, and just to do like bite-sized chunks on the days that I do homework, because this year I decided that I wasn't going to do any homework on internship days, because I have 2 days a week of internship and they're 10-hour days, and I was able to like schedule things out to work for that, like to work with me on that. And so that's been something that's been really helpful, because like coming home from the county and like some of the stuff I see during the day, I'm like, I can't go and write like about like my past trauma and my identity, you know, like I can't do that right now. And so luckily, like giving myself those 2 days has been something that I've been able to do. And I give myself enough time where if something comes up, like, and I have to skip a day, like if I'm not feeling good or like if, I don't know, something happens, like I have enough time to make it up later.
I think my response will be weird. I have a reputation, I guess, for doing things in a short turnaround. Like both policy papers, I think I wrote in a weekend. And I think for me, it's I like to have a full plate, so I don't give myself a lot of room to deal with things appropriately. But when it comes to like how I manage all of it and still hit deadlines and still typically get the scores I want, one thing is awareness, so like what Henri and Marjan said of like you have to know when things are due. You have to know what's coming up. Like if you don't have that, I don't know how you get anything done. Like people who don't have calendars don't make sense to me. I don't know how you live your lives. So awareness, both of like your semester and all your deadlines, responsibilities, as like in terms of what's on your plate, and this awareness of yourself. Like you need to know like your strengths and weaknesses so that you can budget accordingly. Like if I didn't feel comfortable in writing, I would not allot myself such little time to do things. Like if I knew the things that I am less comfortable with, I do a lot more time for. So I think awareness of what you have going on, and like of yourself versus just like hoping and praying that like you'll step up when the time comes, because it doesn't often happen like that. And then for me, because I'm often in a constant state of sprinting, I'll say, is that it helps you just to be present of like, you know, the next deadline is this deadline. Nothing else matters. Like when I'm working on this paper, I'm working on this paper. When I'm in internship, I'm only an internship. And I think like just triaging appropriately, choosing the thing and then being present with that thing helps me not feel the calendar that I created for myself at times. So, you know, being aware, being present, and then I think also like having I call it a floor. Like I think sometimes, especially when you get to the point where you might feel burnt out, it can be very all or nothing. Like either I'm gonna get all my assignments done today, or F it, I'm not doing anything today. And I have these, they're called like alley-oop days. Like in basketball, you throw the pass and they dunk it. I like alley-oop to the next day where like today I don't got it. Like I've been trying to study for 3 hours, like I don't got it today. So I'll just set myself up for the next day. Like maybe I can outline or brainstorm for a paragraph tomorrow, or I can like, you know, get the reading set up so that, and my notes set up so that tomorrow I can just get started. So I think also finding little ways, because I tend to hear a lot of like all or nothing thinking, and you know, being my preference for CBT, I'm like ding 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 ding, like don't do that. So I don't know if I'm the best example of time management, but that's what works for me.
So I'm not going to completely discard my efforts in time management because I am holding down 2 jobs and going to school at the same time while also then doing internship. So I must be doing something right if I'm still in the program. So for me, what's been working has been, I work 9 to 5, so I can't do anything during that time. That time's blocked out to focus on that as on work. And then Saturdays I also do work. So Sunday, and it's a little sweet spot. I call it my sweet spot, but it's this little hour or 2 hours that I have from when I get to school to when my class actually starts. And that has been what has been helping me and keeping me sane and actually starting some of my work. I won't start writing my actual papers or anything like that, but I do start setting up the outlines for paperwork, for any sort of papers or any sort of projects. So that'll usually be the time where I start doing my research, start going through the articles, highlighting the key points. And then the biggest part that always gets me when I'm running late to submit my papers is also the references. So I start setting up my references and my in-text citations. So that way it can just be a matter of copy and paste when the time actually comes to input it in. And so I've been using that little time in between the class from when I get to campus and the class starting, just to start setting myself up. Because although I won't get to the paper until the week of, I am slowly starting to make way towards it and starting to set myself up for later on success in that manner. So yeah.
A more like practical thing I do is and I don't know how professors feel about this, but I write about one population every single time. And granted, that's where my research is, that's what I'm passionate about. So like it feels authentic to me. but I'm not constantly doing lit reviews for new papers. Like I know the literature on justice involved youth, and I reuse citations, and I'm very good at avoiding self-plagiarism because I practice at work. So I don't know how professors feel about that, but any overlap I can get between my assignments and also my work and school, I will take that overlap and run with it.
I'm also just going to say another really helpful tool, because talking about writing and citations, I taught myself how to use a reference manager the summer before the program started, and it's been very helpful to keep articles organized for assignments, for different classes, and then also actually inserting the citations into papers. So highly recommend that.
Yes. And the librarians can help you to learn that software if you don't want to do it on your own. Never forget the ever helpful campus librarian who will sit with you and kind of teach you how to use those reference tools as well. That's a great point. Thank you. So I see Gavin's joined us again, so I know it's time to switch topics. So let's talk about this balancing act: work, school, family, self-care, internship. How do you do it?
I kind of talked a little bit about it with like giving myself that boundary of not working on homework on days that I have internship. And I also try and schedule it out so that I try to block out like most of my weekends. Like obviously if there's a weekend that I need to use to like catch up, like I'll do it. But for the most part, I try my best to start early enough to where I don't even need weekends. And it's been working for the most part. Like I think that this weekend is the first weekend I've used a weekend to do work. And that's not always doable, but it's something that like I've tried to give myself that boundary of having weekends to myself. And like within that, like when I come home from internship, like or from class and it's just like a long day and I don't want to do anything, I'll like do my little self-care. Like I'll take a shower, or like I'll do a bubble bath, or like just hang out with my pets, or talk to a friend, or just like sometimes I just want to like watch TV. And like I've been very into like my little sitcoms because they're just light and something I can watch and just like check out a little bit. Um, but also I've been doing like Pilates in the mornings on class days. Like I'm at that 7 a.m. Pilates class, which sometimes I don't want to be at that 7 a.m. Pilates class, but I know that it helps me feel better. So just like trying to stick to a routine that I know I can have, like as routine as I can make my day, has been helpful for me. And relying on people in my program that I've gotten close with and made connections with to kind of like be like, oh, like, we're going through this together.
I guess for me, when it comes to like self-care and stuff, like I have to try very hard to not make it another thing on my to-do list, because I'm that person that's like, this is the perfect routine. If I don't do it, then I'm a failure. So I tried to shy away from like concrete things I commit myself to with self-care. And I view it more as like listening, of like, what is my body saying it needs right now? What is my mind saying it needs right now? And then hearing that and taking it, like, right now I need to be social. I need to be like isolated, or like, and just doing that. Versus I think if I don't do that, I can commit to like, well, I know socializing is good. So every Friday I'm going to do this. And then it becomes another thing on my calendar that stresses me out. Like how mindfulness can be for a lot of people. Like I didn't meditate. I'm a bad person. Now I'm stressed. So I think a stance of listening, and also what I mentioned earlier, that being present when you can be. Like at internship, I'm not a student. Well, I am, but like not in the same way. Like I'm an intern there, and like at school, I'm a student, and like just like not thinking about school or internship in the wrong spots. Like right now, I'm just a therapist. Like that's all I'm gonna do. And even in class, like I think, I'm the person where my phone's in my backpack for the most part. And with friends, like my phone's like I always just doing one thing I think helps me like avoid like the mental chaos of thinking about school all the time, and also getting the most out of my experiences when I do choose to allow myself to like have fun or do things like that. So I think presence and like listening have been how I approach self-care, because otherwise a prescription would, I think, stress me out more if I feel like I have to do something.
I would say, like having to work while you're in this program, while you're at an internship and going to class is not ideal, even though it's common. So if that's your situation and you find yourself like on the struggle bus now and again, or as a frequent flyer, that's understandable. I worked a remote part-time job my whole first year. Interestingly, I think it sort of mitigated a little bit of my imposter syndrome, but it also was something I used to sometimes avoid reading or classwork because I felt very competent in my job. It was a continuation of the job I did for 6 years before, versus the newness of the program and the learning and whatnot. I was more drawn to things I felt like I already knew how to do, and I could be positive and feel efficacious. And so I made it. I worked through the summer again, and then was fortunate to be able to receive a stipend for my second year. And I'm not working this year, which is an intentional choice, but not having that thing that's like, oh, this is what I feel like I'm good at. Now, almost everything I'm doing, I feel like I'm new and still learning about, which I think we started talking about the balance. Self-care is part of that. Time management is part of that, still learning. But I think like being aware of what you're getting out of the different areas of your life. And when you start a program like this, when you're in a program like this, all of that balance shifts. And so you can feel like, oh, the thing that I was doing that gave me a lot of confidence or gave me just a feeling of, whether that was your job, whether that was a physical exercise routine you were all involved in that got disrupted by the program, like knowing that those things can kind of have that effect. And then like also the interactions that happen between the outside of the program life and inside of the program. Like if your internship experiences with clients are mirroring your personal experiences with yourself or a family member and another loved one who maybe is going through something similar, and being aware of like that counter transference and all that stuff. And then just like, oh, it's happening. Okay, let me check in with my field faculty. Let me check in with my internship supervisor. I took advantage of all 10 free sessions of the CAPS program my first year, which was desperately needed. And I can't recommend that highly enough. Even if it's just something small. I think I just got a letter that my individual marketplace health insurance premiums are going up $90 or $95 a month next year. So I think we'll be going back to CAPS instead of private therapy. But even if it's just something like more simple, you need like support, extra support, or you're really feeling like you're struggling. Like lots of people I've talked to have really positive experience with CAPS, myself included.
I mean, the whole balancing act for me, the way it's been working would basically be, as Chris mentioned, remaining present with what I'm working on at the moment. So if I'm at work, I'm focusing on my work clients. I'm focusing on what I need to do at work. And then if I'm at practicum, I'm focusing on what I need to do at practicum, what I need to learn at practicum, taking notes, being present there. And during my free time, I try to be present with myself and my own body. And so it does come back to listening to what you need, because although we can sit and say, well, this is what self-care is, and we just start naming different activities, self-care takes different forms for different people. And so for some folks, it can just be sitting in peace and not listening to people talk after hearing people talk all day. And it's usually not good things that they're talking to us about. So it can be very overwhelming sometimes. So just sitting somewhere quietly, enjoying my meal. That's what I consider my self-care. And just being able to be at peace with myself, enjoy looking at my fish, walking with my dog. Like those are the little things that I try to enjoy, just to kind of soothe myself a bit more and take care of myself.
And I guess just one more quick thing in addition to what everyone said. I kind of like need to look and intentionally give myself permission to like let some of my to-do list go. And it's like a very, very conscious decision that like this week I am not going to do X, Y, and Z, because otherwise I tend to think like in addition to school and homework and family that I need to do, I don't know, all these other unrealistic things. And so it takes for me, at least effort to decide like what gets to come off the to-do list and just like show myself grace in that sense that I can't do all of it.
All great tips. So much good information. So here's probably our final sort of topic for today. Faculty interaction. Going to those office hours, asking those tough questions, interacting, building relationships, thoughts, tips.
So many thoughts. I wanted to add one other thing, sort of to the last one, then I'll jump into this one. I have found that this is like a bit old school, but I just think the impetus to sort of take notes on your computer or a device of some kind, or have them out while you're in class, is like really strong. And to try and keep myself present in like classroom things, or even with homework, like I've gotten more paper copies of books, and like I've taken all my notes on a physical notebook this year, which has like sincerely elevated my game, my study game. And like even some of the asynchronous, every so often we'll have a class that goes asynchronous, doing the reading with a notebook and just being completely unplugged has really worked for me. So I'm trying to lean into that more. I would highly recommend anytime you can, even if you're like, you got your notifications off or your thing silenced, like if you can just be totally analog for a while, it's refreshing. Engaging with professors, I think, is like one of the things I feel most strongly about, because I don't know, every single professor you have in a class has a whole world, a career full of lived experience, plus their academic credentials and the things that they've studied, that they're bringing to you. And they have a challenging job. They're up in front of a room full of students who they have no way of knowing what's in our heads, what is our experience, unless we're engaging with them in some way. So not everyone is as comfortable as everyone else in like speaking up in class or sharing a thought. But I would say, like, when you get to do that, asking a question, answering one of the questions the professor tosses out to the class, any type of engagement like that, you're not just, doing it for yourself. Like, your engagement in that is often feeding the learning experience of all the other students. So I think that's really great. And then, like, I wrote down some questions I like asking my professors, whether it's like in class, which gives the benefit of everyone else hearing the answer, or in office hours. I think maybe I mentioned this already, but like one of the questions through Dr. Bailey last semester, I was struggling to like complete the readings and really engage with material. So, and I realized that it's like I didn't understand what the importance of the theory was for practice in me. So I basically had an office hours appointment with Dr. Bailey. I was like, can you convince me why I should care about what we're talking about in these classes, or what we're reading about? And that was really great, because, and the theme of that, I think, is using the professors to stoke your own curiosity or excitement about the subject, because they're probably able to conjure some of that up within themselves, even if they're, unlike Dr. Bailey, maybe of the more dry variety in their lecture style. There's something about them that cares about what they're talking about. So trying to get that to translate to you is one way you can use office hours, or just ask a question. I asked Dr. Lee in our methods class last year. I've waited way too long to ask this question. I was like, how am I supposed to read? I think I asked Dr. Bailey this year. How am I supposed to read these studies, these articles? Because I read them and there's numbers and there's beta, alpha, gamma coefficients, and there's like meta hyper analyses and things. And I'm just like, and I go, I don't know what this is. And I get overwhelmed really fast. So having someone like help me break it down into smaller pieces and tell me the weird backwards order that everyone apparently knows how to read these articles in, which is like the abstract, the conclusion, and then the discussion. I can't even remember what the specific. I said, who would have thought you're not supposed to read this article from the beginning to the end like they taught me? I read left to right, top to bottom. That's what I learned in elementary school. And then the other one is, if you're bored in class, which no one is ever bored in class, but if you're bored in class, like asking a question about the professor's either opinion or personal take on the subject, or like ask the miracle question, like if you were Queen Bailey of the United States, how would you solve this policy problem that we're talking about? Like, what do you think is the perfect solution to this? And like even just engaging the conversation on another level than like sort of this is what's happening, or Or like, what's your personal, I know you have personal experience, Professor so-and-so with substance use, clients that have substance use disorder. How do you see this impact? Does this work for them? Some kind of thing to get them talking about their experience, their passion for the topic, and bring it to life as well.
Love that.
I'll follow Gavin because Gavin is constantly egging me on to participate in class. Like he's like, come on. And I'll admit that I'm pretty like hot or cold on my participation. There are classes where I won't shut up and classes where I don't talk at all. And Gavin is telling me to talk. Varies a lot based on my level of anxiety or burnout at the moment. But I would say I remember last semester, Gavin asked me, he was like, how much are you limiting yourself because you feel like if you start a conversation, people are gonna get mad at you because they want to get out of class early? And I was like, not at all, Gavin. And I left the conversation and I was like, actually all the time. And I was sitting with it and I was like, that question really messed me up. And I was like, I started talking a little bit more after that. So I think I would encourage people to take ownership of their experience and their learning. And if other people want to leave early, they can like leave early. If they don't like your question, they can join the conversation. And I feel that way about school in general. Like this idea of like, I want to avoid this professor or take this professor part of me is just like, yo, just it's your job to get whatever grade that you think you want. So like go do it, like take ownership of your experience. Like so that's kind of my main thing. And for me, I think my participation is mostly drawn by we'll have conversations, and my favorite word is nuance. And whenever I feel like there's not enough of it, I get really upset. And then I feel like I have to talk. But I also think like it's worth thinking about the positive effects of those conversations. Like when you can have an actual conversation about a topic, like just noticing how I learn better after those conversations, I think has made me want to talk more. Like Omri and I were talking about a case study for one of our classes, and I've been thinking about Carl Rogers like every day for 3 weeks ever since. And I think it comes back to my whole thing, like taking a stance of curiosity and openness and learning. And too often I hear this stance of school is just like a chore, to-do list thing to do. And granted, it's gonna feel like this, but I think coming from a learning first standpoint will one make it more enjoyable, get you to participate, get more of your learning, and you'll probably do better anyway because you'll actually learn more. And I think learning the most possible is the same goal as getting an A, except they feel better or worse depending on your framing. So for me, it's just taking ownership and listening to Gavin's nudges in class more often.
For me, I definitely feel like I'm one who participates in class, Chris, yeah, quite a lot. And for me, it's like well, I've always been like that in class, like throughout the whole however many years I've been doing this. But for me, it's just because a lot of the topics that we've talked about, especially in like the 501 through 3 series, or with like diverse populations, or like just like some of those classes are things that I've taken a lot of classes in undergrad and some even in high school regarding. And so like it's just something that really interests me and like I feel very engaged with. So like when like if I know the answer, like I want to talk about it and stuff. So like for me, I've also been very mindful of like sometimes I'm like, okay, Marjan, like let's compose ourselves and let's rein it in, because I feel like I would just keep raising my hand and like I don't want to be that person because I'm already that person, but we need to rein it in. But with like professors, I think just having conversations with them either like before class or like during office hours or something, especially if I know that it's a professor who's interested in a subgroup that I'm interested in, or like in a different part of like aspect of social work that I might be interested in, like just like going in, and even if I don't have a question about like an assignment or a class, just like being like, can you tell me about like this, or what you think of this, or like what your experiences are with this, because like like they're people too, and like building those connections, because also like you never know when it might help in the future, like if like they can help you like networking and things like that. So I'm a big proponent of just kind of like getting to know your professors as well.
piggyback on that point, because I feel like it can be really easy to view professors as like barriers on your way to the grades you want. And I found when you talk to them, it's like, oh yeah, like they're people and they make decisions based on this reasoning. And even if I don't always agree with it, like at least it's a reasonable take. And I think it helps humanize your experience and it makes it less irritating when you remember that the professors and Dr. Bailey is furiously nodding along. Yep. So I just wanted to piggyback on that point.
And I think for me, what I try to do, because I think in class, maybe I am on the quieter side, in the first part of the semester, before things get really busy and papers are due, is just going to office hours, even if I don't necessarily have anything to talk about, and just introducing myself and almost asking like, what do I need in order to be successful in your class this semester? And also like read about the professor, and then you have a baseline to go off of, and you can ask them questions about their interests, and that in a way kind of like breaks down a little bit of that wall between scary professor and grad student. And I remember Dr. Cap at our orientation said that office hours are sometimes like lonely hours. And I was like, oh, I don't want the professors to be lonely. Like, so you're not wasting anyone's time, and you're not like, I don't know, being annoying or a burden. If that's like something that runs through your mind, the professors are there for you. So.
I would also add that like sometimes I feel the pressure to like I feel the pressure to appear as though I really know what I'm talking about and I'm a great student and I want to be your favorite student because of all the stuff I know and how blah blah blah. And I think what I've been trying to challenge myself to do in this program is like honestly try to be more authentic as I meet with professors and be like, I'm having a hard time caring about this last couple of weeks of content, or I know we talked about this in week 3, but that was a week I missed the reading, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand that again because it doesn't pick up on it. So trying to worry less about the professor's perception of me as like someone who has really picked up everything the first time and does all the reading for every class assignment and all of that, and just trying to engage like honestly. I know that might for some lucky folks that probably sounds like a very basic thing to do, but for me it's like, oh, I feel like I need to hide my ignorance, and I'm trying to sort of like put it on as my costume now. One thing.
I mean, I found that speaking with professors early in the semester, as Omri mentioned, is what works well for me. Just because during the semester, I'm just surviving. I'm gonna be very honest. I am just surviving. I'm getting through the semester. So I will talk to my professors when I need help because at the end of the day, I'm trying to get my money's worth for my education. And the professor is obviously the wealth of knowledge. That's where I'm getting my knowledge from. So I will go and pick my professor's brains every now and then if there's a bit of energy in there. However, I definitely do encourage that we go earlier on in the semester when we're still fresh, when we still have that kick of energy running through us, just to go and get to know who we're going to be spending the rest of the semester with, who we're going to be learning from, and what their interests are.
Thank you all for sharing these amazing, wonderful tips that I think will be of huge benefit to the student body. They're also a benefit to me. I learned so much about how you learn and what's useful and what's not useful, and that only makes the faculty more receptive and better at teaching you. So I really appreciate all the thought and the effort and the candor and just the energy that you put into having this conversation with me today. I appreciate it so much, especially on Sunday, right? Like that's extra credit right there. Is there anything else anybody wants to share about their experience, maybe what you wish you had known at the beginning of your time that would have been helpful, or any other sort of parting thoughts you want to share before we kind of wrap up for this recording?
I have one. Sorry, Kevin. It's gonna be okay. I came in so scared, like there were so many like thoughts and ideas that were being put into my head, and just realizing like that might have been someone else's experience or what other people like thought, but like going into it with my own, being like, you know what, I'm going to have my experience and see how that goes. And it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And like, it's going to be okay. And that's something that has helped me a lot.
I'll add, I think it's something I've been thinking about because at least amongst our cohort, there's this often joke of like, we're almost done. Oh no. So I think part of me is now in this wavelength of like recognizing like this is coming to an end and like I should try to enjoy it. And not that I didn't enjoy the first year, but I think it's more intentional now. Like, you know, connections come and go, friendships come and go. Like, not all these things are going to be here forever. So, like, I'm now spending more time on campus, more time with other students. And obviously, I'm pretty involved in school because we're having this conversation right now. So, I think for me, like, as someone who's a transfer student, I've never been anywhere for more than 2 years. So, I'm very mindful of like, this goes by fast. So now that I've like survived the first year, I think I'm more in the space of like, let me just like take advantage and enjoy this while it's happening. And it would have been beneficial to my mental health to start there versus end up there.
I'm fully on board with that. And I think I wrote down, the thing I wrote down is release yourself from the tyranny of everything. I think for me, especially if you're in this field because you're enjoying it or you're interested in it, there is so much that you might want to do, learn, practice, like pick up. There is so much, reading to do, and a lot of it is really exciting. I think making friends with the idea that you're not going to learn everything that you could hypothetically or potentially learn. You're not going to, every decision you make about writing on this topic can sometimes feel like a decision to not learn about 10 other topics. And that for me can lead to decision paralysis a little bit. So realizing like when it comes to your internship, you can't pick an internship that's going to teach you everything that everyone else's internship is teaching them and giving them that experience. You may have a week where you've got so many things to do. And I found it sometimes it's better for me to really dive into like my practice class reading and working on like the case study response. I'm picking up a lot from that, and I'm gonna miss some of the theory this week. But sometimes doing one thing well is better than doing 10 things barely. And with really close to that is like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think it's kind of the same thing, like giving yourself permission to not get it right 100% of the time, not be perfect. Try, fail, try again. Past failures don't mean you'll make the same mistake in the future. And then if you do, then that's okay too.
Okay. Well, oh yeah, go ahead, Omri, please.
Oh, I was just going to say a lot less inspirational maybe than Gavin and everyone else. But the things I tell myself when the semester, like when it's crunch time, is really that it's temporary. So if I just like hunker down and get through this little chunk of time, it'll all be over and then I'll be able to go and it'll be winter break and I can like sit on my couch for hours wishing that it was the semester when I had like stuff to do. And then also to let go of the end result. I have a little post-it note on my computer that says that because it's more process oriented, as Gavin was saying, like what is the learning that you can get out of the situation instead of the grade at the end.
Yes. Yes. And I would hope all students would take that as the takeaway message, is that no agency is going to look and grimace if you got a B+ or an A- in 521. They don't care. They care that you're knowledgeable, that you're equitable, that you live social work values and ethics, that you care about your clients, and that you're skillful. And it's all about what you learn that shapes that experience, right? Not the grades you have, but the learning that you've taken through this program and internalized and really connected to. That's what's going to make you a good practitioner. So I like that all of this advice is really leading towards that same outcome of learn for yourself, learn for the joy of learning, learn for the clients so that you can be there for them, right? And I really appreciate all of you sharing your incredible wisdom, your tips of the trade, and your success stories with our student body, because I think, you know, peer support is the most important thing that you have going through grad program and even professionally. And I'm really just so thrilled to have been a part of creating this with you. So thank you so much for your time. All right.